Welcome back to Eastern Panhandle Talk with Mike Hornby. You have 1 hour left with me, folks, and then you don't have to deal with me again until Rob takes another vacation. We are joined by our co-host, New York Times best-selling author, John Gilstrap.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good to see you again. And, of course, the one and only, the legend, John Doyle.
Well, good morning, all.
We're joined this half hour by former candidate for governor, Chris Miller. Chris, can you hear us?
Loud and clear, gentlemen. How are you guys?
Doing good. How are you?
Man, I'm having a blast. Lots going on at work, and my oldest son just graduated from high school, and he's now off into the real world, so that's going to be fun. He's going to spend a year away on one of the Rotary Exchange scholarships in Brazil, and then come back and get a full ride. Yeah, get a full ride scholarship to go to Marshall. So excited about that.
How long is he going to Brazil for? Is it just for the summer, or is it a
year?
A year. Okay.
Yeah.
We hosted a Rotary Exchange student from India for a couple of months.
Where in Brazil is he going to be?
He's going to be in the city of Catanduva, which is in the state of Sao Paulo, and that is about 4 hours to the interior of the city of Sao Paulo into the state, where this big agro community. And he's going to spend time with a family there that has a bunch of sugarcane, coffee, and orange plantations, and learn about the agribusiness in Brazil.
I went to Brazil a few years ago, and it was so bizarre to fly 9 hours and stay in the same time zone.
Oh, yeah.
Never done that before.
Straight down south.
Yeah. Sao Paulo is one of the biggest cities I've ever been to in my life. It is unbelievably large.
Yeah, it's lots of sprawl, and it's just so interesting how it's all built, too, because there's no real zoning at all.
Yeah.
And so you've got, like, stacks of favelas, and then right beside it you'll have a different neighborhood, and then you'll have a luxury neighborhood, the middle-class neighborhood. It's interesting.
Now, does he speak Portuguese? Or will he'll be learning, I'm guessing?
He'll be learning it. Long story short, I spent a year in Brazil myself after high school on a Rotary Exchange scholarship, and got really, really close with a family down there that had these, farming plantations, and I got bored going to high school because I'd already graduated, and so I rode around every day with the dad of the family and learned about the agribusiness in Brazil, and had an awesome, lifelong relationship we developed. And there he had 3 daughters, and he didn't want the American teenager living in the house with the 3 Brazilian girls, so I lived with his mom in a different house. and yeah, right. And she was an interesting lady. She, at the age of 18, married a 50-year-old Spanish immigrant farmer, and she had 3 kids with him, and then he died. And so she had to learn how to run these farms as a female in Brazil in the 70s, and she became like a legendary businesswoman because she ran those things with an iron fist. And so I had some really, really cool experiences with the people I got to meet and stay with down there. And all 3 of the daughters came up and lived with either my parents or me and my wife and kids. And now it's my kids' turn. It's just kind of crazy how you just get lucky sometimes.
So you're not campaigning anymore. You're back to work. Is that
Yep.
what you're up to?
Doing what I do, man. Running a bunch of businesses, and you'll laugh at this, Mike. I started a promotion company, and we patented a 1-minute, 1-round fighting contest. And we had our first event in Bluefield, West Virginia, and just packed the place. It was hysterical. It was like watching 35 bar fights all in one night. And so, yeah, it was an absolute riot.
But you didn't fight, right?
No. Yeah.
Have you hung up your gloves?
I'm retired. As far as my wife is concerned, I'm retired. And I don't know if I'm a pretty good salesman, but I don't think I could ever convince her otherwise.
Now, I have to ask you, because you're on, and I have to ask you, are you starting to campaign again, or have you hung up your political career?
Man, I appreciate you asking that. There's only one job that I want to do, and I'm an executive by nature, and that would be leading the state of West Virginia. So the next opportunity that occurs, the next time the door opens, I'm going all back in. And meanwhile, I'm going to do what I do and work and have fun and employ a bunch of families and make some money.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you. What do you think about the big, beautiful bill, and how do you think that affects West Virginia moving forward?
Yeah, so great question. We start broad and then work down to West Virginia. I still think the biggest issue that our country faces moving forward is the national debt. And it's the size of the national debt. And it's also the fact that we have this generational shift coming, and the Social Security and Medicare trust funds are going to be insolvent by several $1 trillion. So we're not $40 trillion in debt. When you factor in the pending insolvency of the Medicare and the Social Security trust funds, it's more like 80 or 90 trillion. We're going to have a generation of people paying Social Security taxes into another generation that was much bigger that's retired, and there's not going to be enough revenue to pay out the benefits. So, like, that's a real big problem. And so no matter what they've done, and they've done a lot of good stuff in this bill, it still doesn't necessarily address the real big issue that we face. And thank goodness in a world of cow pies, the United States of America is still the best patty on the field. But we cannot manage and grow an economy moving forward where we have that much of a percentage of our GDP in national debt that it really, really affects our ability to manage our economy. And that's really where we are. I hate to say it. It sounds boring, but it's the truth. So how this thing affected West Virginia, though, there's a lot of good and there's a little bit of bad. We have a lower median income state per capita, and anybody under $60,000 a year is going to experience a huge tax credit, which is good. So if you make $60,000 a year or less, you're going to get a lot of money back to be able to spend inside of the economy and to take care of your family. The losers in this deal are the West Virginia hospitals. There's a lot of, scare out there about, they cut Medicare and they cut Medicaid. Well, yeah, they did in a lot of ways. If you're an illegal immigrant, you're probably not going to qualify for benefits. And also, if you were an able-bodied person between the ages of 19 and 64 and don't have any dependents and can work but don't, then you either have to work or do some sort of community service to maintain that Medicare or Medicaid. But that's it's nowhere near as big of a section of people as, the media is telling us. At the same time, though, you still, even if you do stand to lose some sort of Medicare benefit, the hospital still has to serve you. And so the hospitals are required by federal law to provide all of the care that are needed if someone comes in with or without health insurance into their emergency rooms. So they still get care. The problem is the hospitals then can't bill for it. And so that's why I said this thing's bad for West Virginia hospitals, because there's going to be a segment of our population that still just does not work. They will not, and they'll still go to the emergency room to get health care, and the hospitals won't be able to bill for it.
But
so
didn't they put $1 billion to each state for rural hospitals?
Yes, they did. So that's the other backfill that actually will be really, really good for West Virginia because of our size. And so we may wind up in the long run in the good for this one.
Mm-hmm. My concern about the workfare element of this, particularly in West Virginia, in the more impoverished counties, parts of the state, it'll be hard to go to some place. First of all, there are no jobs to be found, and then to go and check in or whatever is necessary without a vehicle, and you live out in the middle of nowhere. I'm concerned about that element in a very rural state.
I'm as well, and traveling all around the state. When they did that crazy political campaign thing, there are some counties in West Virginia that are really, really, really like third world countries. I mean, there is serious poverty there. I'm from Huntington, and that's it's probably the largest or second largest city in West Virginia. You guys up there in Martinsburg, there's all kinds of growth and activity. There are some counties in West Virginia, in the southern part of the state in particular, that are destitute. They need help, and that is the exact right thing to say, because there are some people that live there that, for the exact reasons that you said, being isolated back in counties and hollers, that it's going to be really, really tough for them to meet some of these criteria. I mean, it's a problem.
John Doyle.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. John Doyle. Back to this is surprising, and I may be wrong. I had thought the $50 million that was put in for the hospital was $50 million for the total country, that it wasn't $1 million per state.
$1 billion per state is how they've split it up, I believe.
So Pennsylvania gets $1 million and West Virginia gets $1 billion.
That's the way I understand.
That's what I understand.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I actually there was something you said a little bit earlier I wanted to go back to, Chris, when you said you're interested in running again, and I'm intrigued by that. Would you, when you said there's an opening, there are openings and there are openings, in 2028, if the current incumbent Republican governor runs for re-election, would you actually consider challenging that person in a primary?
That's a great question. I seriously doubt it.
Okay.
That's a tough one to overcome. It takes an incredible amount of resources to be able to pull something off like that. And I think the correct answer is, if we're heading in the right direction, then there's no need. But if we are not heading in the right direction, then it's something that's worth considering. And let me tell you exactly the reason why. West Virginia is one of the few states in the country that is declining in population and has an aging population. And that creates this perfect storm where eventually, because of the way the federal funding works for Medicare and Medicaid, more and more of our state's budget will be required to handle that amount of money. And it'll soak up so many resources that it'll affect our bond ratings and crack the bond ratings and put us in this horrible financial tailspin where there's going to be huge austerity and deep cuts. And the places that affects the most are the rural counties. And it's going to be bad. And so West Virginia absolutely positively has to add about 200,000 people to the state over the next 8 years to avert that financial catastrophe. And so if we are growing our population and focusing on economic growth and development and doing everything that we need to do to accomplish that, then no. But if we are not, that is a DEFCON 3 type level of an issue, and we got to get everybody involved to help fix it.
Yeah, Chris, John Doyle again. I need to push back on that a bit, I think, but I need to know exactly what you meant. Here is my problem, and I have this discussion with all of my friends in the legislature, Democrats and Republicans. I hear this, we've got to grow a population, we've got to grow our population. And it sounds like thought that if we get more people, that will grow the economy. It won't. Population growth is a reflection of an improved economy. It is not the driver of an improved economy, and I am convinced of that.
So I think you can handle it from both ways. That's the standard economic textbook analysis, right? The economy leads to the people coming to you. That is exactly right, but it's based on the incentive mechanism. And so we know that the problem exists. You have to grow the population. You have to. And it happens because if we do not have that tax base, that increase in tax base, because you look back several years ago, West Virginia used to have 2.1 million people in the state, and our entire state structure and state budget is built around that. And now we've got about 1.7. And so you still have the existing same amount of, government and way less population. And so also, because of where the need is going to come with a lot of our elderly people that are going to be moving into retirement that need all this additional care, and the way that it is tied federal funding-wise to Medicare and Medicaid, more and more of the state's budget does get tied up having to pay for Medicare and Medicaid and the federal reimbursements. And so that's where the financial catastrophe comes from. We will have way less money to be able to manage everything, and that's where the financial ratings come into play. So after the pandemic, here's something we learned, and I'm going full circle here. We learned that there is a demographic shift happening in our country. And guess what's moving it? There are, of the 3 of the 4 fastest growing states post-pandemic, Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, they all have one thing in common: a 0 state income tax. And that was moving people to those states. We also learned that people were moving out of these bigger cities because they didn't want to be surrounded by concrete and they didn't feel safe. And so they were looking at places that thought would be safe to raise their families. And so that's not an economic thing as well. That's more of a socioeconomic and cultural thing. And so there's clear evidence that there are other things moving people and population in the country right now, aside from just having the right economy and the right rules to the playing field. So I would counter back that you got to have both. If we're going to do it and solve the problem that exists right now, we got to have both. So yes, we do need to adjust a lot of the regulations and taxations inside of the state, but we should do it systematically based on what we know is moving people already.
Chris, back to the population growth thing. The problem is, I've talked to a lot of people who think we should grow population by recruiting more retirees. I think if we're going to improve the economy by additional population, it needs to be by young people.
Well,
I'm 83, Chris.
Well, I think it's both, right? I think we can decrease the personal income tax. I think the legislature is really moving towards that.
I hadn't gotten to that yet.
And I think we can increase the amount of young people, and because that's our biggest export, by bringing in those great jobs and those high-paying jobs.
But it's a Gordian knot, because you're not going to attract young families if we don't improve the education system, and you've got to have the economic. You've got to have something for them to do. So we build this big, beautiful factory, and then we, for the most part, as I understand it, most of these places, the steel mill, I'm trying to remember, Nucor. Most of that help was brought in from out of state, which is new blood. Doesn't do much for, I guess, the ancillary businesses there. But until we fix the underpinnings, the infrastructure of education in this state, I think we've just got a forever problem.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do all.
It's all tied together, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's almost like you have to be fixing the education system while you're actually adjusting the rules of the playing field to grow an economy, while you're also actually recruiting other things that are directly related to bringing, like families and other people to the state. Like it's an entire. It's an entire puzzle where everything is tied together.
Chris, back to the income tax again. This is John Doyle. The 3 states you mentioned that don't have an income tax, every one of them has real estate property taxes through the roof. Under West Virginia's constitutional structure, you can't do that. And whatever government you provide, particularly education, it has to be paid for somehow. So I really think that's a non-starter in terms of improving our economy.
I would disagree.
Yeah, I would as well.
Well, how are you going to change the Constitution?
Well, I think we are making strides. Chris, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, please, Mike. Go ahead.
As a legislator, I think over the last 8 years, we have made strides. We are lowering the personal income tax. I think there are other ways that we can grow our economy. Can we get to zero in 2 years? Probably not. But we can move that direction, and we can make this state attractive to young people as well as retirees.
That was not my point. You would have to make major constitutional structural changes and shift government from the state level to the local level, which is what property taxes do. And that is what states like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas do. They have high property taxes that go to local governments, and much of government that is done at the state level in West Virginia is done at the local level in those states. And that is a fundamental change in our Constitution. So I'm just want everybody to understand that.
And I want to actually change the subject. If Chris, your business is, I don't know if it's primarily, but you certainly own a number of automobile dealerships. And as a practical matter, we're seeing tariffs, we're seeing, the various things that are happening in the economy. Is that affecting your business, and is it affecting sales?
So there was, when the fear really started, that's a great question, by the way. When the fear really started, yes, there was an uptick in sales because everybody was worried that they have to buy a car now as opposed to when they were planning to 6 months from now because they'd be more expensive. And it still hasn't happened yet. And like watching Trump, for example, and how he handles all this stuff, he is systematically going country by country and industry by industry and creating the what if fear scenario. In my, just one of the industries that I'm in is the automotive space. Mexico, for example, all of Ford, Chevrolet, General Motors, and Stellantis, which is Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, all of their trucks they produce are all manufactured in Mexico. And if we're talking about a 25% tariff and a 25% increase in all of those things right off the bat, the United States economy can't handle that. And it would dramatically affect sales. And these guys know that. And so they also realize that in order to relocate a manufacturing plant from Mexico to the United States, it takes a bunch of time and billions of dollars. Billions. And like what Trump is looking for is the deal, which he's systematically gone through industry by industry and country by country to start creating. And I would imagine, if I'm a betting guy, that there are not going to be any huge automotive tariffs that occur from anything that comes out of Mexico. Now, there might be some stuff that comes out of Germany because of how that relationship's going, but it has yet to affect the automotive industry in any way, shape, or form. And it really, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to. It's not going to affect prices dramatically for certain segments of the automotive space because of how they're negotiating this stuff.
Also in Germany, I don't want to get too far over my skis here, but Germany in particular does not like American cars, right? So it's very, very difficult to sell American cars in Germany. So don't you think if they were to open up their economy to our automotive business, the tariffs become a moot point?
Yes, that is exactly right. That's what they're looking for. It's just a level playing field. The other funny thing about Europe is, and not to go off subject, but there are all of these incentives behind the scenes that particular industries get in the form of, I don't want to call them tax subsidies. They're not. They're almost like rebates. And so even if you're talking about a level playing field, the stuff that we look at from a tax credit standpoint, they get, but then they also get rebates inside of certain industries that then basically give them a competitive advantage. So that's the funny thing is it's way more complicated than just the amount of tariffs that are on something.
So do you sell EVs and hybrid vehicles in your dealerships? The question is going to be...
I do.
And any effect on sales in the last few months? Are they still strong, weak? What?
So it's cultural, right? And places like West Virginia that are way more natural gas and coal like reliant from a cultural standpoint aren't as big on electric vehicles as other places are. The other really, really funny thing in this, big, beautiful bill, inside of it, there was back in the Carter administration, they had created something called CAFE standards, which then the Obama administration came in and created these fuel efficiency requirements and created a market where if you did not hit the fuel efficiency requirements for your entire average fleet, you had to buy and sell, credits on the CAFE standards market to then, basically wash out. And so Tesla, for example, received billions of dollars a year from both General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler because they were not being able to hit the fuel efficiency requirements that were in place. And in return, the electric vehicles that Tesla was producing was looked at as infinite gas mileage. And so they basically had issued a bunch of coupons. And then they sold these coupons, and General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler all bought them. And that raised the cost of the vehicles for General Motors, all of the domestic manufacturers that weren't hitting the fuel efficiency requirements, and drove down the cost of all of the EV vehicles, in particular Tesla. So in this big, beautiful bill, that incentive is eliminated because they got rid of the tax. So there is no tax calculation for fuel efficiency requirements anymore. So it's going to be funny to watch what happens with the cost of trucks and SUVs, which has been what's primarily driving, that fuel efficiency thing and the increases in prices they've experienced. And what happens with the prices of electric vehicles now moving forward, because they're not going to receive the same amount of incentive to produce those. And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Well, that's okay by me because I'm a gasoline person. I'm a liberal Democrat, but I'm a gasoline person.
Liberal Democrat.
I just want the market to determine what the prices are, not the government.
Yeah,
that is very true.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Chris, we got about 60 seconds left. Anything else you want to share with our audience before we let you go?
I will say that it's always great to be here and talk with you guys. I absolutely love it. And this is one of the smartest radio shows, probably the smartest radio show in West Virginia that I've been on. You guys are just awesome. And
not when I run it.
Well, no, it's always an honor to be on, Mike, and it's always an honor to hang out and talk with you guys. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, for your time today. I appreciate you reaching out and offering to come on.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
You are watching TV 10 and listening to WRNR.